Welcome to our analysis on the American economy, theories that shape economic policy. In the United States and other countries, national government policies influence the economy, a system for producing, distributing, and consuming goods and services. Economic policies are those aimed at creating and/or maintaining a healthy economy. Economists view a healthy economy as one in which unemployment is low, the prices of consumer goods are relatively stable, and the productivity of individual workers and of the economy as a whole is increasing. Although labeled as a capitalist economy, the U.S. economy is not an example of a pure capitalist economy. In a pure capitalist economy, private individuals and companies own the modes of producing goods and services, and the government does not enact laws aimed at influencing the marketplace transactions that distribute those goods and services. In other words, a pure capitalist economy has a government-free marketplace. Although private ownership of the modes of production dominates the U.S. marketplace, it is not a government-free marketplace. National government policies in some cases encourage and in other cases mandate certain business practices that the government deems essential to sustain a healthy economy. Because of the many national policies enacted to influence the economy, the U.S. economy is an example of a regulated capitalist economy, or mixed economy, not a pure capitalist economy. People around the world want their governments to engage in actions that ensure a healthy economy. Yet the actions a government takes to ensure a healthy economy depend on the economic theories its lawmakers follow. In the United States, Democrats and Republicans traditionally disagree on economic policies, each justifying their policy preferences with different economic theories. Today's debate about the proper role of the national government in the economy are nothing new. It was the lack of an economic role for the national government and the poor health of the economy under the Articles of Confederation that sparked the call for a constitutional convention in 1787. The framers of the new system of government established by the Constitution envisioned a national government much more involved in the economy. Moreover, although citizens initially supported a very limited role for the government in the economy, a laissez-faire economic policy, as the national economy evolved and experienced ups and downs, citizens and corporations sought greater government involvement in the economy. And economists developed new theories about the proper role for government in creating and maintaining a healthy economy. Keynesian economics, supply-side economics, and monetarism. Until the late 1800s, a majority of the American people believed that the national government should take a relatively laissez-faire, or hands-off, stance with regard to the marketplace. That is, they thought that the government should neither encourage nor discourage, through its laws, business practices that affected economic health. In his Wealth of Nations in 1776, economist Adam Smith described the principles underlying the theory of laissez-faire. Smith's classical capitalist argument emphasized that the most effective means of supporting a strong and stable economy in the long term is to allow unregulated competition in the marketplace. According to Smith, people's pursuits of their self-interest in an unregulated marketplace would yield a healthy economy. Although it supported a hands-off approach in general, the national government became involved in economic activity as early as 1789 when Congress approved the President George Washington signed the first import tariff, and a tariff is a tax on imported goods. As manufacturing economy replaced the farming-dominated economy during the 19th century, the general laissez-faire stance of the national government disappeared. Technological advances fueled industrialization and the movement of workers from farms to manufacturing jobs in the cities. As immigrants flocked to the United States in search of the American dream, the supply of cheap labor ballooned. Giant corporations formed, and individuals with money to invest accumulated great wealth. Monopolies and trusts also developed, limiting competition in a variety of ways. Income inequality, the gap in the proportion of national income held by the few at the top of the income ladder compared with that of the many on the lower rungs, grew. At the same time, the quality of life for most working class citizens deteriorated as additional family members, including children, needed to work to pay for life's basic necessities. As fewer and fewer people achieved the American dream, even with all family members working, many Americans began to look to the federal government to improve working and living conditions. In the late 19th century, the federal government began to respond to workers' demands for better wages and working conditions, and to business owners' calls for uniform national rules and regulations for business practices to replace the existing hodgepodge of state-imposed regulations. Moreover, by the earlier 20th century, the national government took steps to protect public health by passing laws regulating the processing of food and drugs, and the cleanliness and safety of manufacturing plants. Though not directed at the health of the economy, such regulations increased the cost of doing business, hence affecting the economy. In addition to regulating working conditions, the national government began to use the tool of immigration policy to bolster the national economy and the wages of American-born workers. For example, the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 disallowed immigrants from China who were willing to work to build the railroads for lower wages than American-born workers. The contemporary public debate about the impact of immigrants on the U.S. economy in terms of wages, working conditions, and the cost of health, education, and welfare policies is discussed later. Clearly, the national government never fully implemented laissez-faire. Moreover, as the national economy grew with industrialization, Americans accepted and even called for a mixed economy featuring regulated capitalism. Today, consensus continues on the need for some level of government involvement in the marketplace to ensure a healthy and sustainable economy, environment, and standard of living. But debate continues over how much government involvement is appropriate and what specific policies the government should enact. Before the Great Depression of the 1930s, government officials and economists believed that a balanced budget, a budget in which the government's expenditures, cost of doing business, are equal to or less than its revenues, money raised from taxes, was important for a healthy economy. Yet officials and economists recognized that during wartime, the government might need to engage in deficit spending, which is spending more than is raised through taxes to pay for the military effort. During the Great Depression, when unemployment rates soared to 25%, President FDR and Congress supported deficit spending to address the severe economic depression that engulfed the nation. The Roosevelt administration implemented numerous economic regulations and a number of innovative work and public assistance programs. These policies drove up government spending at a time of shrinking government revenues. A key objective of the government's increased spending was to trigger economic growth by lowering unemployment rates, thereby increasing demand for goods because employed people means more people with money to spend, thus boosting the national economy. Deficit spending, Roosevelt said, would provide the solution to the American people's economic woes. The new economic theory of John Maynard Keynes supported Roosevelt's unprecedented peacetime deficit spending. Keynesian economics recommends that during a recession, an economic downturn during which unemployment is high and the production of goods and services is low, the national government should increase its spending to create jobs and decrease taxes so that people have more money to spend to stimulate the economy. Based on this theory, during a depression, which is a long-term and severe recession, deficit spending is justified. During times of rapid economic growth, an economic boom, which is the opposite of a recession or depression, Keynesian theory recommends cutting government spending and policy and possibly increasing taxes. In the long term, deficit spending during recessions and collecting a surplus when the economy is booming should lead to a balanced budget. Hence, Keynesian economic theory advocates using fiscal policy, the combination of tax policy and spending policy, to ensure a healthy economy. In February 2008, following the tenets of Keynesian economics, Congress and President George W. Bush approved tax refunds for citizens totaling $168 billion and tax cuts for select businesses. In September 2008, Congress and the President pledged to spend $300 billion to rescue two top mortgage companies, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and the American International Group, or AIG, a major international insurance and financial services organization. The Bush administration continued these fiscal policies in the fall of 2008 by winning approval from Congress for $700 billion to bail out faltering Wall Street financial institutions. President Barack Obama and Congress continued to use fiscal policies to stimulate the sagging economy by enacting the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, which authorized $787 billion in combined tax cuts and federal spending in February of 2009. The ARRA, or American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, tax cuts and increased federal spending composed what the media and government officials refer to as a stimulus package. The goals of the ARRA were to create and save jobs, jumpstart the nation's economy, and build the foundation for long-term economic growth. Whereas Keynesian economics has shaped the economic policies of Democratic and Republican administrations from Roosevelt to Bush to Obama, President Ronald Reagan implemented a different economic policy in his efforts to deal with the economic downturn that began during the late 1970s. President Reagan introduced the nation to a competing economic theory, supply-side economics, which advocates tax cuts and a decrease in government regulation to stimulate the economy in times of recession. Supply-siders argue that the government collects so much money in income taxes from workers that they are discouraged from working more than they absolutely need to, because any extra effort will just mean they pay more in taxes. In addition, high taxes drain the economy because they diminish people's ability to save and corporations' ability to invest in to increase productivity. Therefore, the theory goes, if the government cuts taxes, workers will be more productive and people will have more money to save and invest, thus stimulating economic growth. Supply-siders also argue that because government regulation increases the cost of producing goods, deregulation, reducing or eliminating restrictions on business, will contribute to increased production at the same cost, thus increasing the supply of goods. Republican President George H.W. Bush initially continued the supply-side economic policies of Reagan, but before the end of his presidency, Bush broke his promise not to raise taxes in an attempt to begin to address the growing national debt. The total amount of money owed to others due to borrowing. In addition to increasing taxes, he signed into law new regulations. Democratic President Bill Clinton battled the Republican-dominated Congress for most of his presidency. Clinton's proposed spending increases were muted by Congress, and Congress pushed for tax cuts. As a result of those policies and economic growth, by the end of the 1990s, the national government was no longer engaging in deficit spending. President George W. Bush, working with a Republican-dominated Congress for most of his presidency, initially pursued supply-side economics by cutting taxes and deregulating. However, as the recession that began in 2007 persisted, the Bush administration and Congress approved increased spending to prevent the collapse of numerous financial institutions. Economist Milton Friedman, a one-time supporter of Keynesian economics, is today best known for yet another economic theory, monetarism, which advocates that the government's proper role in promoting a healthy economy is the regulation of the money supply to ensure that the rate of inflation remains low. Inflation refers to a rising price level for consumer goods, which decreases the purchasing power of money. The Bureau of Labor Statistics provides an inflation calculator that allows you to determine what yesterday's dollar is worth today because of inflation. For example, according to the calculator, $1.25 in 2009 bought what $1 in 2000 could buy. Monetarists believe that too much money in circulation leads to a high inflation rate, which slows economic growth as people spend less because of higher prices. In addition, as the rate of inflation increases, investors begin to worry about the health of the economy, and investments may decline as a result, ultimately limiting economic growth. On the flip side, the monetarists say too little money in circulation means there is not enough for new investments, and that consequently, new jobs are not created. This situation, too, retards economic growth. Today, monetarists target an inflation rate of 1 to 3% per year to ensure an adequate money supply for a healthy economy. They believe that the national government must use its monetary policy to maintain this level of inflation. So the question is, should one economic theory predominate? Although economists, government officials, and citizens broadly agree that the government should act to ensure a healthy economy, there is perpetual debate over how involved the government should be in the economy and what specific policy actions it should take. Where people stand in this debate depends on which economic theory they advocate. Each theory supports the use of different governmental policies to promote a healthy economy. Before we discuss these various policies that theoretically promote economic health, we consider how governments measure economic health. Once we know what a healthy economy looks like, we can then consider the effects that various policies have on the performance of the economy. Be prepared to discuss in class which one of these economic theories you support the most.